Hi everybody and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about triangles, congruent triangles, and some of their properties. So the goal from today is to understand some of the similarities that we see with triangles that are congruent. And the second aspect of this is we are going to be looking at congruent triangles and solving based off of the properties that we learned today. So some good definitions today, things that we'll be using in proofs, and also things that we're going to be using in terms of solving. So congruent triangles, these are triangles that have both the same shape as well as size. So here each triangle has 3 angles and 3 sides. And all measures of the corresponding parts of the 2 triangles are congruent. Then the triangles are congruent. Just a really fancy way of saying if everything about them matches, if everything about them is the same, then we can say that they are congruent triangles. So congruent triangles means everything about them is the same. One key thing about congruent triangles is when we write a congruent statement, so if we're talking about triangle ABC, everything in our congruent statement also must match. So we cannot put our second triangle in just some random order. So if we're going to have A as yellow, and B is red, and C is green, we have to make sure that we are finding the red, yellow, and green terms from our second triangle. So here for E has the single dash just like A does, so we know that E must come first. Our second term is red, so we have to find the red term in our second triangle. So here, F has 2 dashes just like B does, so that is our second term. And our third term is either the one left over, or we can look at it as the one with the 3 dashes that matches from C over here. So 3 dashes from C over here is G. So this is a fancy way of saying we're just color coding, and by color coding, we are matching our angles together. So yellow, red, green. So we do this with our angles and with our sides as well. So as we mentioned before, our congruent angles are the color matching ones. So angle A matches angle E. We also have angle B matches angle F, and angle C matches angle G. So again, order matters. We got to make sure everything matches. Same thing goes for the sides here. So we can look at our congruent sides as just matching up between the sides, or we could also see them as a similar type of color coding. So the easiest way to do this is find the single dash, match it with the single dash, find the double dash, match it with the double dash, find our triple dash, match it with our triple dash. And based off of that, we can make some congruent statements. So side AB, so line AB is congruent to line EF. So these are the sides of our triangles that match up with the green. If we keep going here for red, BC matching with FG. And then lastly in blue, AC matching with EG. So again, looking for our pairs that match. Everything color coding definitely does make this just a little bit easier. So next is part of what we're going to use for proofs, the definition of congruent triangles. So 2 triangles are congruent if and only if they're corresponding. So this is just a fancy word that means matching. If these matching parts are congruent. And CPCTC, this is something that we're going to use in proofs. And this is a proof reason that just says if we have corresponding parts of congruent triangles, they are congruent. So basically it's just saying matching parts of congruent triangles are equal to each other. So that's kind of the intro to some of the things that we're looking at. And the biggest thing is in our chart here, order matters, color coding, matching, making sure everything that we're doing is a match before we're writing it down with a different part. So flipping over onto the back now, taking a look at some of the examples that we might see. So in the following figure, it tells us QR is 12, RS is 23, and QS is 24. And it also tells us that RT is 12, TV is 24, and RV right here is 23. So based off of this, what we can see is we have one matching side, two matching sides, three matching sides. So all of our sides of these triangles are the same, so we have some congruent, some matching triangles. So by looking at this, we have to name these congruent triangles and name the corresponding and matching sides. So we already color-coded it for our sides. So we know that from Q to S is equal to T to S, and R to T is equal to R to Q, and R to S is equal to R to V. So those are just what we highlighted in our colors here. So that was our green highlight, our yellow highlight, and our blue highlight. So that's showing sides. Now the challenging part comes in. We have to see which angles match which angles. So a good way to think about this for angles is just starting one at a time. So we'll say we'll start with angle Q, see what is congruent to angle Q. Well, angle Q is between 12 and 24. So you need to find the other angle that's also between 12 and 24. Well, that's angle T. Angle T is between 12 and 24, so that is our matching angle. So you want to kind of reference this, index it to the sides that it's next to. So if we have angle S is in between 23 and 24, so it matches up with angle V, which is also in between 23 and 24. That only leaves one left over, so we have angle R, and you can probably guess it's just equal to itself. It's between 12 and 23 in both diagrams. So that's how we set up our angles after having already set up our sides for our triangles. So when we go to write these triangles out, we have to make sure that we are following this matching order. So if we're going to say triangle something equals triangle something, well, if we start off with Q, the first term of our second triangle has to be T, because Q and T match. If we start off with S, the next term has to be V, because S and V match. And if we end with R, that last term has to also be R, because R and R are matches for each other. So that's the key when we're setting these up and trying to find the matches for their congruent statements, is we have to make sure everything is matching. And the best way to do that is to write out your matching pairs first. That way when you go to write your final answer, it's already there, and you can just basically copy it down. So now we're going to look at some of the properties of triangle congruence. So reflexive triangle congruence, all that this means is triangle equals itself. So triangle KLJ is equal to itself. And we have to write it in that order, so KLJ again. Symmetric, what this is telling us is that if we have triangle KLJ, and we're following this sequence, so K to L, L to J is equal to Q to R, R to P. So KLJ is equal to QRP. Symmetric just tells us we can do that in the opposite order. So we can also do QRP is equal to KLJ on the other side of the equal sign. And lastly, our favorite one here, some of us call it substitution, some of us call it transitive. And as long as we're applying it correctly, we'll be okay. In this case, we are looking at transitive specifically. So to make it a little bit easier, we'll call this triangle 1, triangle 2, and triangle 3. Basically what it's saying is if we know that these first two are equal to each other, and then 2 and 3 are also equal to each other, then we know that 3 is also equal to number 1. So it's basically saying we can cut out the middleman. Number 2 is equal to both 1 and 3. So because 1 and 3 are equal to the same triangle, then they also must also be equal to each other. So if we write this out, we'll follow that same order. Triangle KLJ congruent to triangle QRP. And then our second one here, triangle QRP being congruent to y to z, z to x, triangle y, z, x, then the last thing this allows us to do is to take this term in blue that's repeated, and we are now allowed to set yellow equal to green, because yellow and green are both equal to blue. They're equal to the same thing. Because they're equal to the same thing, they're also equal to each other. So we're going to finish up with an example video here, and once we are through our example video, we'll be done with today's notes. So what I'm going to have you do now is hit that pause button, and we can go ahead and submit the same angles as well as the same sides for example.